Next week, my friends, you're going to have a missionary. I'll be going on retreat. I'll be leaving this afternoon to my usual place in upstate New York. Sometimes it's good to get away, isn't it, my friends? And I'll be back the following Friday, and then that weekend, the new priest will be here as well, so you get a chance to meet him. Because of that, since Father's Day falls in next weekend, I'm going to preach and offer reflection on fathers. I read a bunch of stories this week, and it was interesting. One of them was directed and gave some options to fathers that their teenage daughters are dating and some of the things they can do. One of them said, as they were leaving, pick a walkie-talkie out of your pocket and within earshot, say this. Subject is wearing khakis and a blue polo shirt, driving a green Ford. They said it's very, very effective. You know, I read some comments that teenagers wrote about thanking their dad. And it's interesting, some of the things they wrote. Some of them were very good, taking me out for ice cream after I struck out, telling me, thanking me for saying please and thank you. But some of them were this: thank you for loving my mother with all your heart. Interesting, a teenager would say that. Thank you for teaching me to pray and the importance of faith. For building that voice inside of me to say no when I was being tempted by my friends. And then, of course, a couple of them were helping me buy my first car, my first house. And then the last one is, thank you for being my hero. My hero, their father. You know, my friends, when we run into a crisis in life or having difficulties, we turn to mom. We want somebody that can listen to us and be attentive. The mother is the heart of the family. We turn to her. As a child, what do we look for in our father? And no one talks about these areas, but what does a child look for in their father besides providing? We kind of take that for granted. They see how the father lives outside the home. So if the father has good work habits, guess what? The son or daughter will too. If the father's involved with all sorts of crazy activity outside the house, guess what? But if the father's importance, he comes home from work and makes the family part of the family, or he becomes part of the family, they'll know it's important. They'll know it's important. All studies across the board, if the father goes to church, most likely the children will. If the mother goes to church, it doesn't matter. You see, the children want to see how their father acts outside of the house. Outside of the house. Interesting, isn't it? The father's influence on how the children act outside of the home is critical. Is critical. The father needs to model that. Needs to model that. I was reading a story that said this very clearly. It was an 8-year-old boy was skiing with his older brother who was 10, he was 8, and his father, and he got sidetracked. And, they were all great skiers. And this was late afternoon, and they couldn't find him, and then night came. So here's this young 8-year-old boy that spent the night in the mountains in sub-freezing weather. The next morning when dawn came, the helicopters came and they found some tracks and some outskirts of which they tracked him down. The sergeant, the policeman who found him, was amazed when he saw him. The first was, how is he? They said he's in super shape. Matter of fact, he's in better shape than we are. He dug a hole by a tree and covered the area with branches and inside his little pit. No hospitalization, nothing. He was in wonderful shape. When asked him how he was survived outside, he simply said, I did as Dad told me to do. I did as Dad told me to do. Should I go to church? I'll do as Dad told me to do. Do I have good work and study habits? I'll do as Dad told me to do. See, it involves outside the house. They will do as Dad told me to do, and as Dad models for me, right? As models for me. Fathers, don't ever forget the influence you have on your children. On your children. The other thing that children look for, and I mentioned it here, the best thing a father can do for his children is to love their mother. Is to love their mother, right? There's a story of Darren, who was 50 years, and we have a 50-year-old couple, 50-year, we'll celebrate that later today. But you know, Darren worked on the railroad. And he was an engineer by trade in the early 1900s. And he worked with all the hard laborers, so they would be out in the middle of nowhere laying track, and they always wanted an engineer with them. And you know, the language, he said he always felt like a fish out of water with all of them. But he got married, had children, and whenever he was asked, he and his wife, what the success of a good marriage is, he would always say, and she would echo the words, 17 miles. 17 miles. How did you make it to 50 years, he'd say? 17 miles. And that was the joke within the family, 17 miles. But no one knew what 17 miles meant. And finally, one of the grandkids said to Darren, you know, Pop, what do you mean by 17 miles? And then he told them the story. They were out in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness, and he was working in the rail lines, single, and the boss's daughter was coming to make a site at different areas, and so she was going. These railroad workers knew two things about this girl, that she was 19 and she was pretty. That's all they needed to hear. The criteria, my friends, of finding a good lady, right? But you know, so here he is listening to these guys for an entire week talking how excited they were to see this woman. They made things for her, and they even got the nicest clothes. They got all bathed. And so Saturday morning, they were all excited. Train pulls up to this makeshift little stop that they had, so she wouldn't step out down the tracks. They made something for her. She walks out, and just like they thought, she was absolutely strikingly beautiful. But who was next to her was Darren. Darren. So she comes walking out, and Darren comes walking out with her. After they spent the day, and she went on, and Darren ended up marrying her, they said to her, Darren, how in the world did you get on that train before it got that stop? He said, I went to the previous stop to meet her. But that's 17 miles away. And you must have to walk through the night. He said it was worth every step. It was worth every step. We often hear, my friends, we often say, you know, what can we do for our wife? Walk 17 miles. It'll turn her heart every time, my friends. One thing he did, walk 17 miles, won her heart, and they were married over 50 years. There's nothing that turns a woman's heart than her loved one sacrificing for her. Walk 17 miles, guys, and it's worth every single step. And so today, my friends, we celebrate Father's Day, and we need to. We need to honor them, we need to love them, and we need to thank them for all they do. God bless you.